Welcome back to another day of today's technique. Today we are going to use edge highlighting. What is edge highlighting? Well, it is pretty easy. We have here our model, and what we want to do basically is to give our edges we have here a bit more of a highlight. Sounds a bit stupid, but you will see it. For that we have our palette prepped with our normal lighter shade we used before, because we last time washed our model. Every color is now a tiny bit darker, so this will be our perfect edge highlight color. I also have here a bit of fluorescent paint. This comes a bit later, but it's a small trick I want to show you. For that we just load our brush on, and the trick to a nice and crisp edge highlight is that we dilute it so much that it stays in place, but not too much so it doesn't flow away. So we want to have a nice in between. We can check here again on our paper. Yeah, it's a bit dry, but that's okay. We can wet it a bit more, and I think then we have it perfect. And what we want to do is, we don't want to highlight with our tip of our brush. We want to use the middle part. So here the slack is a nice example. We take our brush and then we use the side of our brush, not the tip, the side. So you angle it a bit like parallel to the model. That's why I'm also holding it this way. That makes it a bit easier. And then we just go along the edge here. And our paint is just making contact with that edge. And depending on how much you angle your model in relativity to your brush, you also have it a bit thicker on one side or a bit less thick on the other side. And I just ride along those edges here, and that gives it instantly a bit more pop of color. If we zoom in a bit, you can see it very good here in the back part where we have the darker part. But we can also demonstrate that here. For that I will turn my model. That makes it easier for me to hold. And then again, we need to refresh. So fix it up. A bit of a water droplet on our metal part. We don't want that. You can also always check on your nail how good it flows. And again, parallel, and then we just go along the edge of our model. That will just simulate the light catching the edge of our material. It is of course different for every material. For metal it is pretty easy. It's mostly just like the edge. But for example, leather has a bit of a different edge highlight. It has a bit of a rougher, because when we look at leather, it wears and tears on the edges, and that creates like tiny scratches, and those scratches then catch the light as well. So instead of just a straight line, I can demonstrate that here again. Oh, we can take the other leg. We just, of course, do our normal edge highlight. And then if we like, we can just wick our brush alongside of our edge. And that will then create a bit more of a texture. There you see the normal edge highlight version, and here, come, there we go. So here we see the scratchy edge highlight, and here we see the just along the line edge highlight. And this is how you can quickly also convey a different material if you like. So now onto the trick I want to show you with the fluorescent. For that I am using a bit of a more special fluorescent color. Not the one that comes in the Vallejo, but you can of course use the Vallejo, but I just really like golden. Golden makes acrylics, but the nice thing is with those they have a very high pigmentation. And if you want to use fluorescent, I would highly recommend getting a golden. You can get like one of those, they are very big, here 30 milliliters, so you use those for a long time. And you just take a bit of your golden and then mix that in with your normal color, and that will then create a nicer oomph. Because if we look at it on a color wheel, we are saturating our paint. We are adding more saturation to it. Instead of a white or a ivory color that would desaturate our color, we add more saturation to it, making it look brighter without losing saturation. That is the nice thing when you use fluorescents. I really like to use them for like my final highlight, because they give you that oomph. They give you that small little extra that you don't get from just using a white or a other color. And we just again try to find a nice edge, and we want to go along that. I think my paint is a bit too watery. We can just dab our brush a bit on the paper and then test again. I think now it's better. And maybe it's not really an edge, but we pick out here this rim. If my camera wants to focus on it. There we go. We take here this leg. Sarah, we already had edge highlighted, but now I'm going over it again with the fluorescent pink. And that will just make this look a bit more alive. And that is basically how we edge highlight. We just don't use the tip, use the side if you can, of course. Some areas you can't, but most of them you can just take your brush and we just glide along the surface parallel, and that makes it pretty quick and easy to just run along and highlight those edges. Of course, when you have like areas that are a bit more tougher to reach, there you need to exercise a bit of brush control and not hardly brush or push our brush into it. And that's why we want to have this consistency of in between running and just staying there. So you want to have something that is easily removed from your brush without much effort, and also something that stays in place. And that's why I also like to use a bit of a bigger brush for that instead of, again, one of those tiny brushes, because they just hold the moisture better. So this is how we etch highlight. Thank you very much for watching, and next up we will start painting our cloths. See you there.